right. Welcome to the Money Bear podcast. Today we have a special guest who is one of my best friends, somebody who I actually started a business with, somebody who is totally a pain in my butt, but has an absolutely amazing story. So today I've brought on Marc from BetterWallet, and I'm super excited to just talk about his story. He has one of the most incredible stories. He's probably blushing right now because he hates
A little bit.
when people talk about him in a nice way. So we'll get right to it.
Stop being nice, Chloe. God.
I know. Well, that's what's funny is like our relationship is just giving each other shit. Like it's
Right.
not like we're never friendly with each other. We're always just like, I mean, we're very supportive of each other, I would
Very
say.
supportive.
But then like we'll say something nice to each other and then immediately have to insult the other person.
Exactly. I call it radical candor, right? It's like when you know someone so much where you can give them that harsh feedback, but like they're not going to take it the wrong way. And
Oh,
it comes from a
100%.
place of love. At least that's what my mom tells me.
Right?
She insults me.
Right. Well, it's a perfect example. Even when I was getting ready for launching this podcast, I sent Marc a couple of like photos of the artwork that I did for the podcast. And I sent him a message and I go, do these suck? And he goes, for the podcast? And I said, yes. And he goes, yes.
No, to be fair, you've done a lot of great work as it relates to graphics, and a lot of other great things, but that wasn't it.
It wasn't my best work.
The one she has now is like on point, though. I tell you, like check it out after you listen to this episode, but it is on point. Now I feel like I need to edit mine.
Well, it's because he recommended somebody off of Fiverr to do it. So we have the same artist doing our podcast artwork, but I feel like that's like the perfect description of our relationship.
Essentially, yeah. So as we kind of go through this podcast, there will be a lot of times where she's going to make fun of me, and that is normal. It's unplanned, and us being just completely candid.
Yes, for sure. But that's the best part. So Marc, you have probably one of the most amazing stories, and I do want to get to that. But before we get to that, kind of tell folks like who are you and like what is BetterWallet?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Marc Russell. BetterWallet is all focused on helping people invest and save their money the right way. Eliminating all the noise that you see online and the noise that you hear from other people, and just laying out a roadmap on like what actually works to get your finances together. My background is from corporate America, corporate finance more specifically. And even more specific than that, working at Vanguard, working at fintech firms, private equity. So I know a couple things as it relates to personal finance. In addition to that, I also went through my own finance journey, and that's how BetterWallet really started. So I combined the School of Hard Knocks, everything that I went through, in addition to everything that I learned from corporate finance and just licenses and all that stuff, put it all together. And that's essentially what you get with BetterWallet, helping people invest and manage their money the right way.
I love it. And so you mentioned the School of Hard Knocks, though. So let's talk about your hard knocks.
Oh.
So tell us, for somebody who has never heard your story before, and, you know, obviously we're not going to talk about just your story for an hour and a half, but no, I mean, we could. It would be fun. I'll just sit here and nod the whole time. I'm like, wow, this podcasting thing's easy. All I got to do is like ask one question.
That's the gem. That's how you do it.
The beauty of it.
Just sit back and listen.
Right. So for those who don't know you, I think you have probably one of the most inspiring stories out there, especially in the finance creator space. You started off your journey in life in the foster care system and then had a lot of hard knocks along the way, even from there. So kind of give us like, what was it like growing up for you? And kind of how did that inform your worldview now?
Definitely. So yeah, my story is kind of crazy. And I'll make sure I keep it within an hour. But I was born in Kensington, Philadelphia, which unfortunately is known as the heroin district of the world, of the country at least. And both my parents were both addicted, victims of drug abuse. So when I was born, preemie baby, which is really surprising because I'm a big guy now, but that's glory to God. But I'm a bigger guy now, but preemie baby when I was born, and almost immediately they put me into foster care because obviously my my parents weren't able to support me. So from foster care, it kind of bounced around the foster care system from Philadelphia to Harrisburg to Lancaster, living with all types of different people, different cultures. For a little bit of time, I lived with the Amish, and that really like helped round like my perspective on the world. I lived on farms, all types of stuff. But I'm, now that I'm older, I'm very grateful for those experiences. But when I was younger, you kind of grow up with like no stability in a way. Like there's no family tree to go back to and say, oh, well, I'm going to do this, or I'm this person because my grandfather was, he served in the military and that's why I'm strong and whatever. Like I didn't really have that for, 13 years of my life. I never had like a formal mom and dad or, siblings for that matter. So eventually, after those 13 years, I was adopted by a family in central Pennsylvania. And as much as I wish I was adopted, the family is great. Don't get me wrong, but as much as I wish I was adopted, you kind of hear the stories of people getting adopted by like these really famous people like Angelina Jolie and such. Like it just wasn't the case. So the place in which I grew up was a fairly low income town where most people grow up and live below the poverty line. But as a kid, you don't really know that. You just live your life and play basketball and like hang out with the other kids. But now that I'm older, I know that I even with that wasn't the best situation. No one actually went off to college. No one cared to um, you know care about their academics. No one, everyone around me, they're all essentially entrepreneurs, right? They're all drug dealers. So
Entrepreneurs.
right, they just didn't pay taxes or file a W-2. But that a lot of my mentors growing up, they were doing that, and I thought that was going to be my trajectory. But luckily, my adopted dad made sure that I was on the right path to actually go off to school because that was always his dream. When he was in high school, and unfortunately wasn't able to go to school because his father passed away when he was 18 in the military. So he always wanted to go. So he pushed it on me to, make sure I went off to college, which is something I just never knew anything about. But yeah, just that experience from the age of 0 to the age of 13, 14, it was all about the foster care system and being in these group homes and just understanding different cultures, and essentially trying to make everyone happy, because at the end of the day, you wanted to not age out of the system, meaning like you turn 18 and then you're off on your own. I always wanted to be, adopted. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to be supported by others. So, um, a lot of mental pain that went through that, a lot of mental trauma in those, 13, 14 years, but all things that I'm grateful for now because it made me into the guy I am today.
Yeah, for sure. So for you, when you were, going home from home for the, first several years of your life,
Mhm.
to try and bring money into it, I'm really curious. Did you ever notice how different families handled money differently? Was that ever like apparent to you? Or was there anything that stood out of like, oh, when I was with the Amish family, this conversation happened a lot. Or when I was with this other family down the street, this conversation happened. Like, was there anything from memory that you kind of picked up on?
Yeah, the Amish were actually fairly interesting, because I think they helped me to understand that you can do more with less, right?
Hmm.
Like they didn't believe in like TVs. They didn't really care for like video games and things like that. Like we would play with like bean bags, and like
Hmm.
that was like our thing. So you became very comfortable with like not needing the necessities, the things that we feel like are necessities in a way. Um, and that made me, I feel like that made it easier, as I, became older and became an adult, just saying, hey, like I can adopt a minimalistic, lifestyle, and make sure that I am comfortable with myself and make sure I'm comfortable with like not needing extra things.
Hmm.
So I would say the Amish really helped me out with that, even though I stayed with them only a short period of time.
Yeah, that's so cool that you were able to like take this like little tidbit and like I know you as a pretty frugal person, even
Pretty soon.
now you're a pretty frugal person, at least in comparison to me.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear like, what kind of things you might have picked up on.
Mhm,
And then like when you were adopted into the family that you were with from 13 on,
mhm.
was money ever discussed in the household? Was that something that you were aware of? And
Yeah.
what were those conversations like?
Right. So just for context, my mom was a high security prison guard. My dad worked at a warehouse and essentially moved boxes around. That like was his job. He loved what he did. Um, so in the grand scheme of things, like we didn't really have any money, nor did we really talk about it all too much. It was always, hey, like we don't have money for that. We're on a budget, right? That's too expensive, no luxuries and things like that. But that was my life, and everyone that I knew around me all were kind of dealing with the same things, food stamps and things like that. So that was life. And in my town, it was, a very, very small town. I didn't know anyone outside of that town. So that was the world in which I saw it, right? Or how I experienced it. So, in terms of money, the only conversations we really had about money, besides not having it, was the importance of generating it. So, it was me, and I have five older sisters. And my dad would always tell me that, you're the man of the family outside of me. And your job is to generate income. Like he's from the South. So like he had his thoughts on all that. My mom's family's from the South as well. So it was always, hey, like man supports family. Um, so he and she they both raised me to think that way. So I always had like a side hustle, from selling candy to mowing grass to shoveling walks. I was definitely not the entrepreneurs that were mentoring me, um, but I always had like a side hustle, and I was really good at saving money, generating it and saving it. So I would take my little money and I'll put it underneath my mattress. This is way before I learned about inflation. But yeah, I'll put it underneath my mattress, and sometimes my mom would like come in and like see the money. Like she was like going and like making my bed. She would say like, "Why do you have all this money like saved up? Like, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I shoveled walks the other day from like 4 o'clock in the morning until 8." And she's like, "You made all of this?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like it's essentially free money because I don't mind shoveling walks, and people are willing to pay for it. And I learned the master. I mastered like the upsell, right? Like, oh, you need to put salt on the sidewalk, and yeah, that's an extra $2-3. I can come back every week if you want me to, and you kind of learn how to be like a little entrepreneur at the age of 14, 15. Again, these are all things I'm kind of learning over time. So saving, generating money was always like my thing, and I always had it. Like I think I bought my first pair of shoes back when FUBU was like a thing. My first pair of shoes were FUBU, and they were $100. And I never forget when I bought $100 pair of shoes from FUBU. My dad was like, "Where the hell did you get that money?" And I was just like, "Oh, like side hustles." So that's really what I learned from my family. But saving and generating cash. I mean, that was always like my thing as a kid.
Love hearing that just again because of like knowing how you work in your business now, hearing about how you're like hustling people at the age of 14 of like that's gonna cost extra. It just
Exactly.
tickles me to like the core.
I used to
So like
buy candy from like the neighboring corner store that was like right near my house. Like you remember like the fireballs, like the red like
yeah.
fireball. So I would buy them for like 5 cents, and I would go to my elementary school or high school, and I would sell them for like 10 cents, and I would then use that to buy more, and then that was my other like side hustle that I remember. But yeah, I mean it's crazy how all that kind of translates into business now. But you have to work a little bit smarter when you're managing a business compared to selling fireballs as a kid.
Right. Well, and do you think that that like hustle from the time that you were 14 or 13, do you think that came from your dad's emphasis on generating income or was it
Oh yeah,
something else that really inspired that?
definitely. So he would always say, "Hey, like I'm not gonna be here forever." I just be like, "Ah, Dad, shut up, dude. Like you're gonna be here forever." Like, And he would just tell me that. And I would have that in my head, like, oh my God, like if I don't generate this money, I'm not going to eat. Like I can't rely on my sisters. I can't rely on my mom. Again, this is all things that like I thought of as a kid. And I said, hey, like, I have to make my own money. And it definitely translated well into college and then onto the professional world. Um, just with side hustles and making sure that, I'm compensated appropriately. So it made those conversations easier.
How do you feel like those experiences as a kid, teenager, like doing all of that, the hustle and all of that thing? I'm always so interested in like the kids who decide to start working as soon as possible versus the kids who wait because
Hmm.
they just don't want to work. Whereas like
Right.
you and I both started working as soon as we possibly could. When I was
Right.
9 years old, I was doing concession stands and like making $5 an hour. And they would also give you like, they'd be like, you can eat $5 worth of snacks. So it was like the perfect scenario for me because I was like, well, $5 of snacks could be this many candy bars or some nachos and this many candy bars. And so I just
Right.
like, fraction it out and like figure out what I could eat. But
Right.
I'm always curious, like, what is it about like us? Like, I have 5 siblings as well. And me and my sister were the only ones who wanted to start working as early as possible and making
Hmm.
that money. Do you think like was your dad telling your sisters the same thing of like you guys got to generate income or was it really directed at you and you think that's why you specifically started hustling when you were, super
Yeah,
young?
I would definitely say it was directed at me. He would always say like, they could lean on me if they want to, but you can't. So he was really, really tough on me as a kid. He had the perfect balance of like being really tough but being really nice at the same time. But I just knew he meant business when he was the type of guy who would say something once and then you took what he said. If you ignored it, then you faced the repercussions. But he was definitely harder on me. So my dad was one factor, and something else he said, and I think that helped with my overall experience. Was that again, very small town, didn't really know anyone outside of my town, and he would tell me stories of like when he visited Vietnam, like when he was in the Navy, he said, hey, like I was in South America, I was in all these different places, and he would tell me about all his different travels before he was married and all this stuff. And I was jealous. I was like, man, like there are people all across the world that are doing things that are not what we're doing right now. Like then that just blew my mind. I'm just like, I need to like get out of this town somehow. And no one that I knew really left the country, right? Like I didn't leave the country until I was 25. And he was telling me all these stories. So that was another thing that made me want to generate money and live a life that I never lived before because I felt like everyone kind of just thought within this box.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, well, the only way out is if I generate enough money, if I go off to college, if I work a job that other people aren't working, so I can live the life that I always wanted to live.
Mhm.
So that really, lit a fire underneath me as he was telling me those stories and telling me, hey, the only way out is education or a lot of money
Yeah, and you're
or
like, "I
both.
want both."
Right, right.
Exactly. So, once you got into college, would you say it was smooth sailing from there?
Oh, hell no. Absolutely not.
I knew the
So
answer.
yeah, so just to talk about my last couple years in high school. So as I mentioned, like no one went off to school. And I did well academically. Again, like I wanted to get out of my town. I wanted to do something different. My dad wanted me to go off to college. So, of course I'm going to do well academically. But I was like the only kid of color, I would say, that was in my AP courses that was really trying to push myself to excel. So you get, you have the trauma from that, right? Like people saying, okay, well, you're not smart, like you can't go off to college, like you're just another like project kid. And I said, no, like I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna go and break something that hasn't been broken before, and I'm going to go this other path. A little bit later in life, they found out that I was making the right decision, but at that time, I was made fun of and like saying like you can't do this stuff. So yeah, obviously I wanted to prove them wrong. So high school, I applied to different colleges with no clue how the hell I was going to pay for it. I had some scholarships, like academic scholarships, but the high school I was part of, they didn't have the money. frankly were one of the worst public high schools. Shout out to Mount Union High School, one of the poorest high schools in the country. So they didn't have the scholarships and all that stuff to send you to wherever. So when I applied to Penn State and I stepped on campus, which Penn State was about an hour away from my hometown, I had no clue how I was going to pay for it. And I remember the student aid office giving me a call and saying, like, how are you going to pay for school? And I was like, student aid, what are you talking about? And they're just like, what student aid? I'm like, the student aid that I should get because I come from do you know my background? Do you know what the last 18 years was like? Like I'm I'm adopted kid. I come from a small town. Like, my parents don't have any money. I'm left-handed. Give me something. Shit. Like, like I'm black.
Left-handed.
The fuck? And then they're just like, no, like you don't really have that much student aid, so you need to figure it out. So that left me kind of begging for money essentially from the student aid office every day. It was bad enough where I would walk in and say, oh, like, hey, Mr. Russell, how's it going? You here again? And I'm like, yeah, like, give me my money. Like, what's going on? So that was my experience really all of freshman year, was begging for money, working odd jobs. I was cutting hair. I was selling plasma to eat. I was doing whatever it took in order to graduate. And I had my dad that I could lean on if things really, really got tough. But otherwise, like, he was still trying to make ends meet back at home with my mom. Because at the time, my mom was retired, retired through disability. So she wasn't really bringing in all too much money. So I had to figure out for myself. So yeah, that was my freshman year. A lot of studying, a lot of partying, a lot of trying to find ways to pay for my education. But again, all things that lent well into who I am today. So after freshman year, after you kind of get through it, the spring semester of my freshman year, I said, okay, smooth sailing. I got most of my education paid for. I still owe, like, I think it was like $900 on my tuition. And say, like, I'll pay it sometime during the summer. I'll get like a small job and I'll pay off $900 over the course of the next couple months. And next thing you know, I remember my mom handed me a letter from Penn State, and it said, you've been kicked out of Penn State. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, why? And they were like, you didn't pay that $900. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you kicked me out because of that? So that was a whole situation. So I had to do what they call a retroactive registration. So if anyone who's listening has ever gone through that, you know how terrible it is. And essentially what they do is they strip away any student aid that you would have been giving in the beginning of the year. And said, hey, like, you have to come out of pocket in order to pay for that. And then your student aid will kick back in. It makes no sense whatsoever, but I had to go through it. So a lot of conversations, a lot of networking with people. And I had to reach out to the dean at Penn State at the time, and, the dean minus ones all across Penn State. And I had to learn how to network and, try to find my way back into school, because I wanted to go back to Penn State. Like, not only was it a great education, but I had friends. Like, I can't tell them that I get kicked out. So you learn all about that, making friends where, people you didn't know before, and talking to people in very high places and being able to present yourself and make sure things are in writing and all that stuff was really critical. And I was like 19 at the time. So eventually, my mom and my dad, they knew that they needed to take out a loan in order to pay for my first year of school. So the student aid would then kick back in. And it was tough for them because they didn't have the best credit. They didn't have any money and all that stuff. But luckily, being from a small town, someone kind of threw us a bone, and they were able to secure the money for my freshman year at a ridiculous interest rate. I want to say it was like 15, 16%, like, for a personal loan. Yeah, it was dumb.
Wow.
Yeah. But they knew that, eventually they'll go and pay it off. But
right.
That was it. And I remember the day that we got that loan, my dad secured it. We're actually working together at that time. So I was working at the same warehouse that he was working as like a summer job. And he showed me, the letter that he got from the bank that he was, approved. And he was like, dude, like, it was one of those moments where like the father son or like you and your parent moment where he's just like, dude, like no matter like what happens, like taking one day at a time. I'm proud of you. I'm happy you're going off to college, like all this stuff. And again, I was like, fuck you, dad. Like, why didn't cuss at him? But I said, like, you know, he would have killed me. I was like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like, I'm just doing it because you want me to go off to college, whatever. And he was like, dude, I was trying to be nice to you, but fuck that. Like, I'm like, I'm gonna continue to make fun of you. So we're kind of going back to the. Sorry, I think my mic is screwing up. Can you hear me? Good.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're going to the warehouse, and we get there, and we're working just a normal shift. I'm working my shift. He's working his. They offer me overtime that day. Oh, this is all happening within one day, by the way. They offer me overtime. I work another 3 hours. He goes back home, and he comes back to pick me up. It was probably like a 20-minute drive or so. And we're like in the car. He's taking me back home. This is like maybe 12 o'clock at night. Well, I guess 12 o'clock in the morning the following day. And we're laughing and joking, and he said, hey, like, you're my buddy, right? Like I was just joking about earlier, like so we're just like kind of going back and forth. And again, like had that father and son time of like, I'm proud of you. I'm happy you're going off to college. Like I wasn't able to go. I graduated top of class, but I had to go to the military, take care of my family because of what happened to my father. I said, okay, well, I get it. Like I'm doing it for you. So we end up going back home and get out the car. I take a shower. After the shower, and I'm notorious for taking very long showers. I walk up the stairs, and on my way up, I see my dad like at the computer, and he was like, "Why did you take another long shower?" And I was just like, I don't know, like, I was dirty from work, like I worked overtime, I'm tired, whatever. And he's like, yeah. So like I walk upstairs, I get on my computer, and then he goes to take a shower, and he goes in, and you kind of see, you hear the shower turn on. And then I'm just talking to my friend on the computer about like how long of a day it was, and just talking with like colleagues or just friends that you work with, work buddies. And then you hear like a giant thud, and I'm just like, okay, like what is this? Like what's going on? It was like one of the loudest thuds I've heard in the house. And I live in the city now, but in the country, like when something's wrong.
Right.
So my mom is just like, "Where's Michael?" My dad's name was Michael. And I was like, "Oh, like I think he's in the shower. Like I just got out, like he's in there." And she was just like, "I need you to knock the door down right now." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I could do that, I think." So I bust the door in, and then he's there, literally having like a cardiac arrest. At the time, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I thought he was just
Right.
choking on something. So I grab him, just like, dude, like what is going on? And like you think in your head, like, okay, I'm gonna save him, and like we're gonna joke about it like we always do. And that was he was gone. Like he took his last breath, like literally in my hands, like as you kind of see it like in the movies. That's literally how it happened. I just couldn't. It was just such a heartbreaking moment. So my mom's freaking out. She's like, what's the number to 911?" I'm like, "Mom, it's 911. Call the cops." And eventually they came, and they tried to like resuscitate him, and obviously it didn't work. And it was tough. It was tough kind of going through that. And I remember like driving up. So the ambulance eventually came, and they took him up to the neighboring hospital, which in the country is like far away, about half an hour.
Right.
So I'm following behind them, and I would never forget the picture of like the ambulance in front of me, them trying to pump his stomach because they were trying to figure it out as well. And I'm driving the truck, and I'm just like, what is going on? So we get there, and again, from the movies, as you can imagine, like if anyone has ever gone through that, they put you into this like stupid fucking horrible room that's dark, and you're there with your family, and the doctor comes in, and they essentially tell you that whoever is there like passed away in this situation with my dad. So I've had friends pass away, close ones, but I've never lost someone that was in my life that was just that important to me.
And so sudden and so like
Yeah,
it's like this common theme in your life of like you get a little bit of stability and
yeah,
then it gets shaken up again and then a
exactly.
little bit of stability and then it gets shaken up again. And
Right.
like first, I'm so sorry for
Yeah.
that. That's just
Okay.
awful. How old were you when that happened?
I was 19, just turned 19.
Jeez,
Yeah,
19. So it's
yeah,
like you just got through, like, even as you're telling your story of like kind of searching and hunting down your financial aid, I'm like stressed over here. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so stressful. And I'm 31 years old who doesn't like, I don't have to do that, but I'm over here like, I can't breathe. I
yeah,
can't imagine going through that and then finally getting this like realization it's gonna be okay. And
yeah.
then the same freaking day, everything gets turned on its head.
Everything.
Like,
Yeah.
how the heck did you find it in yourself to keep going? Because you didn't stop going to school, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Right.
How
Yeah.
the heck did
So
you do that?
yeah. So that I mean that entire night was just I went from being a boy to a man in the moment, like literally hours. Um, because I could always lean on my dad if something really went wrong, and now it's just like I'm alone. Like I need to like figure. Of course, I have my mom, but she is dealing with like losing her husband, like and taking care of the rest of the family. Um, so I promised him on that day, I was like, I'm gonna be the man that you've always wanted me to be and more. I promise you that. Like I will be the son that you always wanted. And I'm gonna do it for you. This whole life from now on is dedicated to Big Russ. That was his nickname. Big Mike, Big Russ. So yeah, so afterwards, of course, you have like the process is what I call it. Like you go and you have the funeral, like you have to call like do they even call it the undertaker anymore? Whatever they call it now. You call those people and they come in and like, they take the body and it's all types of stuff. And then you actually have the funeral. And my dad was well known in my town, well known in anywhere that he went. He was like the man. And I used to be, very proud. And I still very proud to like call him my dad because I would, oh, this is my dad, Big Mike, and they were, oh, Big Mike's your dad. Oh shoot, like you must be cool. So like I thought it was like cool because of him. So the funeral was packed. Like I think we are there. We're still trying to figure out how long we were there. It definitely felt like it was like 5-6 hours of people just coming in, like stretched around the block of people. And so we had a funeral here, had a funeral down south where he's originally from, and he's actually buried in Alabama, his hometown. But right afterwards, I went back to college because
Mhm.
I'm just like, he wanted me to go back, and it was tough for sure. But I knew that was his dream for me to graduate. So I tell you, like the level of focus I had at the beginning of my sophomore year cannot be matched. I was so focused on everything. If I wasn't in class, I was studying. If I wasn't
Mhm.
studying, I was in class or working out.
Mhm.
That was actually my therapy. Continues to be my therapy. Is just working out and being in the gym and focusing on my body.
Mhm.
So so yeah, so that was my sophomore year, junior year, senior year. Extremely focused, still begging for money every single semester, but you kind of learn the process and the system and like what you need to say and like what you need to apply for. And I was so focused at that time. I was like, okay, you give me the chance of getting $1,000, I'm gonna write your stupid essay in order to get whatever scholarship it is.
Mhm.
Um, so eventually graduated with a degree in business economics from Smoke College of Business at Penn State. And, prior to actual graduation, I applied to a lot of different schools or a lot of different companies, one of which happened to be Vanguard, who I literally had no clue who they were. I was just like, I'm a kid from the hood. Like, I just want a job. Like, I graduated from school. Someone pay me something. And it just so happened to be Vanguard. So, and I got into their what they call their accelerated development program, which is essentially like a launch leadership type of program where they expect me, out of all people, to be like a head of one of the heads of Vanguard within, I think they said like 10 years. That was like their goal. So I'm like kid from the hood, wanting to be the head of at the time, a $2 trillion organization.
You're like, "Sign me up."
Well, in my head, it was like, imposter syndrome, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like you don't know who you're talking to. Like, you have no clue. You guys really fucked up. And
Are you sure you're talking to me? Like, is this,
right, me,
did
little
we,
me.
did you
So
get the wrong resume?
right. I was like, you really fucked up, but cool, I'm here. So a lot of my college, so they choose like 20 people out of the country in order to be a part of this like pretty prestigious and rigorous program. And everyone around me, except like maybe a few, where they're all like trust fund kids, like their parents had money. Like one of my colleagues, her dad was a private equity manager. Like they were good, right? They had multiple houses and all that stuff. And I'm coming in, I'm like, I don't have anything. So it was a great experience because I learned a lot about other people that I didn't really experience at college and in high school and elementary school and such. Um, so I got to learn their language. I got to learn about like true generational wealth. Obviously, I'm at Vanguard, so I got to see a lot of financial accounts that were millions of dollars. I've never seen $1 million before. I didn't know of
Hmm.
anyone that made over $50,000 a year. Now I'm like talking to these millionaires and learning from them, and like, how do they go about generating it? Like, how do they build a business? Like, what's an LLC? And I had all these questions because I've always been like a curious kid.
Hmm.
Um, so as I'm learning and I'm taking the exams I have to take in order to become a licensed stockbroker, the Series 7, I'm just developing and trying to apply what I'm learning from them to my own finances, because my finances at home were a mess because I had all
Hmm.
this debt and I thought I was rich because I was making $50,000 a year. But then, yeah, I learned about Uncle Sam. I learned about, having to pay for benefits, putting money away for your 401k and such. And I didn't budget the right way, to be completely frank. Um, so over time, I go and I'm paying off my debt. I'm learning how to budget. I'm learning how to invest. I'm kind of grinding through the corporate America world, corporate finance world, with just trying to connect with whatever mentors I could get, and that helped me to kind of move throughout the organization. So eventually I became a team leader, and then eventually a manager at the 529 group, the what they call ESG, or Education Savings Group. And that's why I'm so passionate about like 529s and education and all this stuff, because if I had a 529, I wouldn't have to go through what I went through in those last 4 years.
Yeah.
And then during that time, I was able to talk to a lot of parents and grandparents that are putting money away for their kids. So I learned a lot of the different strategies there, in addition to everything else I was learning from all the other departments I was a part of when I was there. Um, so yeah, I mean, that was my journey through 2017. While I was at Vanguard, and eventually after some time, I said, hey, like, I needed to make the jump, so I left Vanguard. But that was uh, that was my college and then Vanguard experience.
Well, and I think it was interesting how you said, I got into this group of people, I felt like an imposter.
Yep.
And at that point, you're kind of in a position where you're advising people on their finances, but you mentioned like I didn't have my finances together.
Right.
So, kind of tell me, for your journey, like what was the first thing you did to figure out your own finances? Was there like a go-to resource? Did you just kind of start winging it? Like what was the process like for you?
Yeah, winging it for 100, Chloe.
That's
uh,
that's how we live our lives. We just
right,
wing
right.
it. We're like,
Just
should we start a
figure
business together? Yes. Should we start a
whatever.
podcast? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in my head, and I've always thought about this, or thought about it this way: start first, figure it out later. Just get started, and if you're 70% sure you want to do it, just jump in. And it's gonna hurt initially, but after, you're gonna you're gonna get your stride, and eventually
Hmm.
you'll be fine, and you can make it perfect later. From college to the corporate world, it has always worked. I believe in the mantra of failing forward. Continue to fail, keep moving forward, and you'll be okay. So, so yeah, I mean, the first time that I try to get my finances together, you ask like, what happened? Like, what did I do? Like, I mean, I try to build my own budget, and I failed a lot of different times. And then I built a real budget where I actually incorporated my variable expenses, right? So you have fixed expense, well, you have your income, then you have fixed expenses, And like that was pretty much it for my first budget. And then when I built my real one, I remember doing like a Google search, like how do you build a budget? And they were like, make sure you put variable expenses in there as well. And it's like, oh, like I don't really have that much in variable expenses. And I actually built it. And you asked like, what did I do? I cried. I literally cried. I was literally like at like on a bench somewhere in Philly, and like I cried. And I was like, I don't have any money whatsoever. I'm making this money from Vanguard. Like, I went through college. Like I can't be poor again. Like I did all this. I should be rich. I should be like, where's my yacht? Like what's going on? Um, so I realized that, I if I don't make a change, I could be living this life forever until the day
Mm-hmm.
that I retire, if I retire. And I remember Googling and trying to understand, like, am I the only one dealing with this? And I learned that there's so many people, so many other people that are dealing with the same issue. In fact, a lot of them were way older than me at the time. So I was like, I don't want this. Like I escaped the hood for a reason. Like I want to figure this out. So, I remember looking it up, and I found that, there's a lot of different strategies to go on and pay off debt, because I realized debt was a big issue on why I was kind of living that way. Debt and obviously poor spending. Like I love going out and having fun, which comes from going to one of the top party schools in the country.
Right. Well,
Um,
so in the moment, before we move on, in the moment where you did actually finally look at your variable expenses, what did
mm.
it show you? Like,
Oh,
was it like all my money is going to cocktails?
oh yeah, it was because I mean, again, like I was one of the only people that I knew growing up that actually went off to college, right? So when I graduated from college, I'm the rich guy, right? Like I worked for this financial firm. People knew of Vanguard because their 401ks were there if they invested into them. And they were just like, yeah, like, so you're rich. So anytime I go back home, shots on me, no problem. You want dinner? I got it. Giving money to family members. Mom, I'm taking care of you. As if I just like made it to the NFL. Like I just got drafted and I was making $50,000 and not multi-millions. So it was a lot of that, a lot of just, I ate out a lot. Like I went to restaurants, I drank a lot, just because I was fresh out of college. And then giving money away, in the form of like, just trying to help my family.
Hmm.
So that's a lot of where my money was going. I was buying new shoes, buying new clothes, because I had to look fresh, like when I went back home, because people need to know
Yeah.
that I was making money,
Because
right?
now
Like,
you have that 50 G's a year,
right,
even though after
exactly,
taxes, it's like maybe 40.
right. So I'm like, yeah, I'm balling, so I have to show them that I'm balling.
Right. Yeah, I
So
had a similar experience too when like the very first time I created a budget, I just like sat down and I was like, I think I know where my money goes. And then you realize you have no idea until
right,
you actually just like sit down and look at it. And I'm like, when I did it, I was like $600 every 2 weeks was going to drinking, being hungover, like ordering GoPuff when I'm like hungover or DoorDash, and like eating out. It was like $600 every 2 weeks. It was just like, I don't want to live this life anymore. Like, I don't think
right,
I cried, but I definitely had a moment of like, is this really how you want to spend the rest of your life? Is like
right.
spending money, eating and drinking?
Right. And that's, exactly how I felt. And luckily again, like I had there were a couple people that were part of my program when I first came into Vanguard that I still keep in touch with now. One specifically, his name is Travis Hornsby, the head of student loan planner. And he was a bond trader at the time at Vanguard. We came in together, but we just really connected because my family's from the South. He's from the South. We love watching football together. And he taught me about like the FIRE movement. And I was like, oh, what's that? He explained, financially independent, retire early. I'm like, people can retire early? What? Like, is that even possible? And he was like, retirement is a number and not an age. I'm just like, dude, you need to lay off the drugs. Like, I don't know what the hell you're talking
Mind
about.
blown.
Right. I'm just like, dude, you are losing it. Like people, no one from my town has ever retired, number one. Number
Right.
two, like you can retire if you spend less than you earn and you put money away, and then you can kind of write off the investments for the rest of your life. So I became fascinated with that. And I said, well, if I get rid of my debt, how much money could I have saved? If I budgeted my money and I didn't go out as much, like how much could I save? If I didn't go and like buy these new clothes and new cell phones, all this stuff, like how much could? And I was like, I started doing the numbers. I was like, I could save a shit ton of money and like be good. Um, Maybe not to retire
Yeah.
early, but enough to just live freely and do what the hell I want to do. Um, so I mean, at that point, 2017 is when I like truly locked in. Like the biggest time or the most focused I've ever been was my sophomore year in college. The second most important and most focused time was 2017 after I left Vanguard and start working for a private equity firm that helped to increase my income, right? So you have to play defense and play offense at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I wanted to increase my income, but at the same time decrease my expenses in order to line that gap so I can invest more of it and pay off debt, which was most important. And then over time, 2020, I became debt free, which was great. Paid off $80,000 of debt from my car to credit cards to student loans. So that was great. And I celebrated. I was definitely hungover the day after. But
How much debt was that?
$80,000 of debt.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
$80,000 that you paid off in how many years?
Over the course of, well, technically I was making those payments from the day that I graduated. So over the course of what, 7, 8 years, but a lot of which was paid off in the course of like the last year because that's when I really
Mm.
focused in. That's when I paid off my credit cards. I paid off my student loans. You know, the pandemic was terrible for a lot of people, and for me, I was able to save a lot of money during that time. I was fortunate enough not to lose my job, but I wasn't going out. I wasn't paying for things. Like people were locked in the house. So I spent a lot of 2020 just saving up and applying it to debt. So that's the reason why I was able to pay off so much in a
Mhm.
small period of time.
Mhm. That must have felt so good. Like
Oh, yeah.
to just be like, I'm done. I'm done owing somebody anything.
Right. And I told myself in 2017 I was going to become debt free by 2020.
Mhm.
I said, "Hey, like debt free 2020, that was my thing," not knowing that the pandemic was also going to happen that year. And as I was approaching the date, I think I was originally supposed to become debt free in like November 2020, and I really put the pedal to the metal in the beginning of the year, and I said, "You know what? I hate July 17th because that's the day my dad passed. I'm going to become debt free by July 17th." So the
Mhm.
day that my dad passed away, what was it? Like I'm doing the math in my head, 11 years up until 2020 is the day that I became debt free. I pressed submit and I paid off my last $10,000 to Nelnet, and I became debt free. So now in my head, it's not that horrible day that my dad passed away. It's the day I became debt free.
Yeah, that's so cool that you did that. That you like
Yeah.
kind of like hacked it and you're like, obviously you'll remember him on that day, but also
Mhm.
like it's a celebration as well.
Exactly.
That's so cool. So you started off by taking inventory of what you were spending, got yourself
Mhm.
on a budget, and then attacked your debt like a crazy person.
Oh, yeah.
And then what? So then now what that happened in 2020. So
Mhm.
what have you been focusing on since 2020?
Yeah, definitely. So, to kind of take a step back, 2019, as I'm kind of going and I'm talking personal finance on my personal page and talking about like, hey, like I'm paying off my debt, like budgeting, this is all great. I found that like none of my friends even care. They're like, why are you talking this personal finance stuff? Like, I don't care. I'm living my life. I'm 20, some years old. Like, whatever. Like, have a ball.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, I'm gonna get my fine. I'm gonna become debt free. Like, you guys are gonna, ask me how I did it. Like, when I become debt free, all this stuff. Um, so I create a page. And shout out to Jeremy from Personal Finance Club. I remember hitting him up because I still follow his page on my personal page. And I hit him up and said, hey, like, I love what you're talking about. Like, none of my friends, when they hear me talk personal finance, so I'm going to create my own page. I'm going to do it I'm going to do it in 2020. And he was just like, nah, just do it now. In typical Jeremy fashion, just now, do it now. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
That. Yeah.
So I created my page, and my aunt followed me, and anytime I would post, she would say like, congrats, like good job. I'm looking like, thanks, go ahead, honey, like you're doing an amazing job. I'm like, thanks, auntie, like
It's so
so
sweet.
right. My aunt Nancy. And so have one follower, 10, then at 100, I'm like, there's 100 people following me on Instagram. Like this is weird. Like people actually want to hear me talk about finance. Like, are they crazy? Um, and it kind of, once I became debt free, it really took off from there because I was documenting my entire journey and everything I just told you on the Instagram page. Um, so at the time, this is maybe like an exclusive quote, but like it was called Smarter Wallet back then. Like it wasn't even called Better Wallet.
Yeah.
And eventually I changed my name, but I was just posting on the Smarter Wallet, and I didn't even show my face for a long time. At 10,000 followers, I actually started showing my face, and like I just found that there were a lot of people, again, like as I mentioned back in 2012, like there were a lot of people that are struggling with finances, not only in my state, not only in the country, but all across the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, luckily with Better Wallet, I was able to encourage a lot of people to get their finances together, a lot of which happened during the pandemic. And I coupled that with like investing in like building generational wealth. Like, how do you go about doing that? Tax advantage accounts, like building trust, whatever. And luckily, it has worked out well, and that has branched off to a bunch of other different projects that obviously about, that we're working on along the same vein of like helping people live a financially free life, let it be
Mm-hmm.
building their own business to managing their money better to investing. So it's really been a blessing to be able to impact so many people all across the world, with the Better Wallet platform.
For sure. And he's being very humble and saying that it went well. So you started in 2019. He's
Mhm.
now at 140, like almost 5,000 followers, verified on Instagram, woot woot, and published in like every publication there is out there, Business Insider, CNBC. Have I seen a Forbes one too?
Not yet, no, but if
It's
Forbes, if you're
coming.
listening to this,
If
put me.
if you're listening to the first episode of the Money Bear podcast by chance, holla
Please
at
God.
us.
Like, I don't think they understand like how much, like, scrap everything else. Like, if I can get into Forbes, like, it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with like the snotty nosed kids that I know back in my hometown and the projects that
Yep.
I could say, like, I made it from Mount Union. You can do it too. I'm in fucking Forbes. They don't know about
Uh-huh.
business. They don't care about Business Insider and Time Magazine. They care about Forbes magazine. If I
Right.
could get in, I'll get off my soapbox in a second, but if I can get in, that would mean the world to all those kids that just need something beyond like what I've created so far. They need something to say, like, I can do that too.
I
Um,
honestly and truly am not saying this just to like toot your horn. It's not about if you can, it's about when you will. Like you
right.
will 100% be in Forbes. I have no doubt about that. So
Absolutely.
we heard it here first on the Money Bear podcast. Marc Russell will someday be in Forbes, and we are very excited about that journey for
Just
you.
work towards it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to that, but in the interim, whenever that comes, I just look forward to continue to build and find ways to impact people all across the country,
Hmm.
as relates to finance, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
So a lot of ideas, how I am, shiny object syndrome, like totally thinking about like 10 other things, even as I'm working on other projects. But yeah, I'm excited to see what the rest of what Better Wallet could really dish out. So
Yeah, for sure.
we will
So,
see.
in your personal finances right now, is there anything specifically you're focusing on? I'm assuming you've got your emergency fund, you're debt free. So, is it really just focusing on investing as much as possible?
Trying to invest as much as I can.
Hmm.
Even now, like with the downturn, like trying to kind of dollar cost average in. Hopefully in the next year, I could actually get into real estate. We'll see how the market goes, but I actually don't own real estate right now. I much rather kind of jump into like REITs, so I don't have to fix toilets and deal with termites. But I do want to jump into the real estate world, um, mostly to learn and then hopefully teach people the way of going about getting into real estate. So those are probably my big two projects. Just
Hmm.
investing as much as I can and then hopefully get into real estate one day to learn, not only that world but also how to house hack and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, right now, is there anything that when you look back on your money journey specifically, is there anything that you wish you had done differently?
No, because each one of my mistakes, like I've learned from, and it just made me into the person I am today. Yeah, I mean, if anything, it would be I should have got into the Philadelphia real estate market when,
Mm,
back in 2020. I mean, Philadelphia is booming now because a lot of people are moving from the DCs and New Yorks of the world, where it's more expensive, into Philly. Um, so you probably labeled that as being like I would do that over again. But otherwise, I mean, I failed a lot and I learned a lot from it, and it helps me to be a better coach as well. So I can
yeah.
like talk to my clients, my students, my financially bulletproof family, and just tell them, hey, like, I made that mistake as well. Like, here's how I went about, getting over that, and how I was able to fix it. So I wouldn't necessarily do anything over again, truly. But it truly made me like the person I am today.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective too. And even like your point on getting into Philadelphia real estate early, that's honestly investors' mistake. Like the thing that everybody, anytime they learn how to invest and they start investing, whether it's real estate or whether it's in the stock market, their
Mhm.
number one thing is always, I wish I had started earlier. So, like,
Right.
if that's you, if you are listening and you've been putting off investing and you're like, I'll do it when XYZ, I hope you know this, whatever day this comes out, like this is the day to get started because you're going to wish that you had gotten started so much sooner.
Exactly.
So starting now is better than starting later for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, I have two final questions for you. One's a fun question, and then one's like a tip question. So, to whoever is listening, if there were like top three tips, and this can be in relation to resilience, life, career, money, what would your top three tips to be to somebody who's like, wow, I'm so inspired by Mark's story. I want to do what he did. What would be your three tips?
I would say number one, try your best to get out of your comfort zone. It's really, really easy to be in your comfort zone and doing that for the rest of your life, but there's so much freedom and growth that comes along with you getting out of your comfort zone. Let it be where you live or like what you do every day, your gym routine, whatever it might be, networking. Get uncomfortable. Like, get comfortable with being uncomfortable is like what I kind of learned throughout my career. And it will help you reach the goals that you've never reached before. So that would be number one. From a finance standpoint, I have to say get on the budget. Like, for anyone who's now on the budget, get one. Like, just stop with the nonsense. Just
And
get it.
rumor has it you have like a $1 budget template.
Yeah. So I actually created. So I didn't tell you this yet. I was going to tell you a little bit later. But I actually added it as a freebie now. So I have my checklist, and it also comes along with my budget template, and
I
it's not a
love
dollar,
that.
right?
I
So
will. We will definitely put a link to that in the show notes. So definitely check that
definitely.
out.
So you have that. So download it today. Um, and so that would be number two, because I mean, that budget changed my life. Everyone I've talked to throughout this journey, online, and you ask them like, how were you able to accomplish what you accomplished? And they always start off with a budget. And the people that are a lot of people that are saying, hey, like, I want to get my finances together, and you're just like, okay, like, do you have a budget? And they say no, they tend to always have like a hard time just getting it together, because you don't know where your money's going. Like, you need to give
Mhm.
your job, you give your money a job. If your money is unemployed, you can't expect for it to work for you. So you want to just have that money plan. um and I would say number three, don't let anyone tell you that you can't be who you inspire to be. Over my life, there's been so many issues that like I had to had to deal with. So many different situations where someone told me I couldn't go out to college, I couldn't join corporate America, I couldn't be a business owner, I couldn't, like, there were so many people that said that, including friends and family. I can't leave that out. That say, hey, like, you can't do that. And what you do is you prove that you could do it, and then those same people will ask you how you did it, and then you help them. You help them to get it
Yes.
right. So there's been plenty of situations where the same people that told me, hey, like, you can't go off and build a business, like, I'm helping them build a business. And it's only because people don't know what they don't know. And sometimes a lot of what they believe comes from their own personal trauma, that someone told them that they couldn't do something, and then they gave up on their dream. So they feel like other people can't go off and do it. So give them grace, continue to teach them, but at the same time, just make sure that you keep in your head that you could be whatever you want to be. I think
Mhm.
Nas said it first, like, I know I can be whatever I want to be. That really, like, that one song changed my life completely, because I was like, oh, like, I can go off and be like a CEO of a major company. I could, and so yeah, go off, go reach your goals, accomplish what you want, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it.
100%. And I second that as well. I mean, it's shocking who comes out of the woodwork who don't support you. You think like your closest friends, and you think like, I got lucky, my family definitely supported me, but like I've definitely had a lot of friends who just went real silent.
Yeah.
Really, really just like I think they see what I do as kind of a joke or something that, is never supposed to be what it is. And it's fun to just be like, look at me now.
Look at me now.
Look at
Look
me
at me
now.
now.
Yes. So fantastic tips. All right. My fun question to you is, what is your earliest money memory? So, like, for example, my first money memory is getting an allowance from my parents, and we were told we could either save it or we could spend it. And every single week that I got my little allowance, I would take my dollar, go to the Kmart with my mom, and I'd buy like stupid little things. Like I specifically remember getting like a little like makeup kit. And like you probably don't know about these, but although you had five
Oh, I
sisters, so
have
maybe you
older
did.
sisters. I know
Yeah,
all about it.
exactly. They're like these like plastic like wax makeup things that you could get like always on the like not on like the actual toy stand. It's like on the side where it's like the little rack of like shit that you can just like buy. I'd always get like one of those. They'd be gone, melted, forgotten about, and eaten by the dog within like 24 hours. But my brother would always save his dollar, and
Mm,
he got really good at saving his money, and eventually just like would buy cool toys like robots and like weird things that I was like, how do you do that? And what that taught me from a really, really young age was just boys are good with money and girls are bad with money. And I believed that until like I was 27. So
wow.
isn't it wild? Like it's like these teeny tiny little moments can inform so much on how we view the world and what we're capable of. So
Right.
for you, what was your earliest money memory?
God, I mean, earliest, I mean, besides like buying my own shoes and like thinking that was rich because I pay for FUBU shoes, I would say just going out and like doing my side hustles and be able to pay for little things that kids like. Like, I love candy. I had like I still have a sweet tooth. I loved ice cream and gummy bears and gummy worms. And it was the corner store that, yeah, I bought those fireballs from is the same corner store that I frequented every single day. And I remember going in with, I think I had like 30 or 40 bucks. And I went in and I swear I bought up everything. I walked in and I believe her name is Mary, the late Mary. I walked in. She's like, "Oh, like, you're gonna get the normal today, like a Huggy and like a couple gummy worms." I'm like, "No, no, I'm gonna get the chips. I'm gonna get the Middlesworth chips, which you can only get in Pennsylvania. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get the Huggies. I'll get like 10 of them." And I remember buying a lot of just junk. And she gave me like I think I had like at least 7 bags. And I went down to like the neighboring, like my where I grew up, like Hartman Projects, and I gave it out to all my friends. And I was like, "Here, enjoy." And they're like, "Dude, like, where'd you get this? Did you?" And they were, I mean, again, like all my friends are entrepreneurs, so like, "Did you steal this? Like, did you just take this from the corner store?" I'm like, "No, like, I just went off and yeah, I wanted to help you guys out, and it seems like you guys wanted like Gatorade and Huggies and all that stuff, so like, here you go." And they still make fun of me today for doing that. They're like, "You blew all your money on us? Like, you guys are you're an idiot. Why
That's
would you
so
do that?"
sweet. You're like,
Um,
because I love you guys. Obviously, you
right.
couldn't say that, but
Right.
wait, and you're
So yeah,
talking about Huggies. Are Huggies those little like the little juice things?
yeah, juice boxes. Like, people call them all types of things, but in my
Yeah,
town we call them Huggies.
to me, I think they were called buggies. Like they were like
Buggies?
little, yeah, and they kind of look like grenades or something. Like it
Yeah,
was just like
yeah.
a little like juice box. That's
They're like
funny.
little
I was
barrels. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I was thinking as you're talking about it, I was like, you're basically like a candy drug dealer, but you're dealing candy to fund your own candy habit.
Right,
So
right.
like you're literally like the only reason I'm selling candy is so that I can like pay for my candy.
Right, exactly. Because I mean, it's funny how like I'm thinking about it now, and I guess it kind of helped me to then sell them candy in high school or like in elementary school, um, because there was seeing people that I was selling or giving away candy to, and like the Gatorades and all that stuff. I was then upselling them on candy a little bit later, so I was like building a rapport. Interesting. I'm like thinking about that now, and they're probably
So
like
funny.
that motherfucker.
You had marketing down even at the time that you were like swindling your friends out of like thinking they're getting a Black Friday sale, but
Oh
actually
my God.
like it's baked into the rest of the year.
I need to call them now. I need to call them and be like, listen, it wasn't that way. I was just being
I'm
nice. And they're like,
sorry.
yeah.
Oh my God, you're
Um,
like I've like they've been like thinking about it for 20 years. They're like that Mark, that he really fucked us over.
charging a
Oh my gosh.
100% premium on fireballs. I can't believe it.
That is so
Oh
funny.
my
I
God.
think the name of this episode is gonna have to be the candy drug dealer. So Mark Russell, the candy drug dealer.
Oh my God. Everyone will unfollow me. They're like, he's a drug dealer. I can't believe
He's like,
it.
let me explain, let me explain.
Yeah.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
and I have to explain this story. I'm like, well, like there was this time I went to the corner store and they're like, dude, shut up. Like you're a
Oh my
fucking
gosh.
liar.
That is
Just
so
listen to
funny.
listen to the episode of the podcast. You'll get it.
Exactly. Like, go listen to the Money Bear podcast.
There you
Exactly.
go.
See, working it in. Well, this was such a joy. I always love hearing your story, and I feel like I learn something new about you every time like I do hear your story because it's so multifaceted. You have been through so much. I don't know a more resilient person, to be totally honest. And like the fact that you're also one of the most like positive human beings that I know is just like you're a special person. You're a special unicorn. Now I hate you. So
Yeah, thank you. I
we
was
can't,
gonna say, I was
yeah,
like, all these compliments. Can you please add
I
like
was
some
like,
hatred on top of that? Just
he's gonna
personal
get really
hatred?
uncomfortable if I don't insult him. So I need to like insult him at the end and be like, I hate you.
I appreciate it. I equally hate you as well. I will
And that's the podcast, everyone.
that is it. That is it. Thank you for having me on and allowing me to share my story.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to have you back on to talk about 529 sometime.
Oh yeah.